Okay, I think we can go ahead and start. Once again, sorry so much for the kind of technical difficulties on our end, and we really appreciate you guys kind of waiting on us. So thanks again. Welcome to this second webinar of this second cycle of the Terraforming here at Strelka Institute for Media Architecture and Design in Moscow. My name is Nicolay. I'm faculty in Program Design Education Tutor here at Strelka, where I co-run the Terraforming program with Benjamin and the team in Moscow. I'm also calling you not from Moscow, but from Bulgaria, where I'm currently working remotely. So as mentioned, this is already the second webinar that we're doing. For those of you or any of you that might have missed it, Strelka Education Program Director Benjamin Bratton already kind of took part in a webinar about 2 weeks ago, and also did a fairly kind of nice and complete official year 2 program launch presentation in early September, going over at great length the new faculty that we have for the second year, the new research teams, the 4 new research teams, populations, zoning earth, anthropoforming, and modes of planetarity, as well as kind of the overall new and ongoing theoretical and thematic considerations that we want to take a look at in the second year of this program. So if you haven't had the chance to look at this already, hopefully those YouTube links work, and please take the time to take a look if you're curious about applying. So today, of course, I'm happy to continue to address some of these questions that maybe more on the content side, on the faculty side, on the kind of thematic and conceptual side of things. But maybe how we wanted to run this additional kind of more informal session was maybe to address some of the more pragmatic kind of questions and any kind of and hopefully also have a more of a two-way conversation together now on Zoom. Which is nice since we're all accustomed to this world from the past few months. So just to say a few more words about my role at Strelka and the Terraforming. So I've been here for a couple years now. My role is to essentially help to select and compose the kind of yearly cohort, sort of this international multidisciplinary group of people that we kind of interview and invite at Strelka every year. I also run the kind of day-to-day activities of the think tank here from Moscow, and essentially kind of curate and take part and work daily with the researchers and the faculty across the successive modules and the structure of the program. And maybe most importantly, I guess my role is to help to translate some of the ideas and theoretical conversations that we have with a group of incredibly interesting, both researchers and faculty throughout the 5 months, and help them turn them into more propositional, design projects and media outputs at the end of the year. So I work a little bit more directly with the group and with the design aspect of the program, as a sort of kind of a design editor or connecting the projects to one another and also to the themes of the year. So all this to say that maybe we can approach this session together to address some of these kind of questions that are more connected to, first of all, the application process, the portfolio, the interview, any questions you may have around the creation of the cohort and the creation of the core component of this program, which is the group of people that we invite every year. Also the structure of the program, maybe more of a how does the think tank operate in terms of weekly, what are the schedules, workload, collaborations, the iterative process, and how the projects come about. And finally also maybe the overall experience of being kind of in this program. I already mentioned, so I was involved with obviously the Terraforming last year, as well as the New Normal, which was the program before. But even before that, I was also a student and a researcher at Strelka a few years back, 1 year before the New Normal. So I have possibly a perspective from both outside and inside the program, and also at least a few opinions on design challenges and maybe even emotional challenges in process of being part of a program such as this one. So please, let's have a very kind of informal and direct and honest conversation about any questions that you may have wanted to ask in previous webinars. But here's the chance to have a more peer-to-peer conversation. So what I thought I would do today, since we have so much information, kind of general information available online, maybe I will start with just 2 or 3 questions that some of you emailed in advance that kind of keep recurring, and that will give everyone a chance to, in the meantime, maybe start populating the chat and just get the conversation going, and maybe just diving right into the kind of more direct and pragmatic questions that you may have. So I have 2 or 3 questions here that I'm just going to start addressing, and in the meantime, please make full use of the chat and don't be shy. Sounds good? Okay. So first and foremost, an obvious kind of question that we keep getting here at Strelka is, given the current worldwide traveling restrictions, what will be the format of next year's program? Which is, of course, a very valid point. And it's actually quite, as you can imagine, it's impossible really to predict necessarily where things will go by March. This year, we've purposefully sort of pushed back the start of the program for 1 month. So we're going to be working from the beginning of March to the end of July, as opposed to from the beginning of February to the end of June. And it's quite difficult to say, or for anyone to say really what will be the current situation in March. And we're, of course, as a team, monitoring the situation quite closely. So we are trying to stay on top of it. What we can say is that so we plan the program to happen no matter what. We are planning the program to be a full-time commitment for everyone who is applying. So the program will be full-time from March to the end of July. And the program obviously will be as much as possible in person. Again, it's difficult to say how much of it, given the fact that we really don't know what March is going to be like. But really, currently, to make it super clear, there is only one application track. There's only one application process. The process is to apply for the program full-time from March to the end of July. And obviously, we will have as much as possible, again, a kind of an in-person, hopefully in Moscow, maybe elsewhere, field trips and the rest of the things that we are planning yearly with the program. But we're also obviously preparing a few contingency scenarios, basically a few other options. If we need to basically adjust the program, we're preparing a version, a more hybrid version, which maybe has some online, offline kind of structure. And in the worst case scenario, if everything becomes even worse than it is right now, we still hope to run the program full-time online. Of course, there'll be a very, very different program, but we are taking that into account. But still, just so it's super clear, the kind of full-time commitment in the application is kind of assumed both on our part and on the people who are interested in applying, as well as the stipend and everything will be also kind of relative to that situation. So hopefully that sort of answers it. If there's any kind of more fine-tuned questions, please feel free to kind of set them here on the chat. The second question that we had kind of come up again and again was the question whether there will be a parallel online version of the Terraforming program. Last year, as maybe some of you know, we had so basically, because Strelka is a kind of independent and because we have a lot of freedom to experiment yearly with our kind of education process, we like to try new things each year. And last year we kind of tried or experimented with a kind of online fellowship or remote terraforming fellowship, where 4 remote researchers were invited to kind of follow the program online and essentially not partake in a day-to-day highly collaborative work that we are usually kind of promoting with our model, but to kind of work independently as researchers who are working on an essay, and benefited basically from monthly meetings with myself and Benjamin and other faculty and tutors to work on a personal project. So this year, we are also kind of looking at something of a possible similar experiment, less like this, and maybe more similar to maybe some of you remember the Revenge of the Real special project, or if you don't, I recommend looking into the website at the Revenge of the Real special project that we did with Strelka Mag, which was basically our on-the-fly response to the worldwide lockdown, where basically it was a separate application. It was a separate kind of special project addressing a very specific series of new themes. And again, people were invited to join some, in the case of the Revenge of the Real, a kind of symposium-like window into the program, where we had several faculty and students present ongoing work. And people were invited to submit essays for publication in the Revenge of the Real Strelka Mag project, which is still ongoing. We're still publishing pieces every few weeks from that project. So essentially this year, if there is a parallel online version of the program, the application that exists currently is not for that. The application that exists currently is for the full-time program, but it is possible that in the next few months, we launch another special project in collaboration with Strelka Mag, where people who can't commit to a 5-month version, full-time version of the Terraforming, could be invited to submit basically an abstract, and we'll have access to some of the material and some of the lectures and some sort of formal engagement with the think tank that will make available, or that we'll explain at a later, that will unveil, let's say, at a later time. Again, now to reiterate, there is only one application process that is for the offline, hopefully offline, but definitely full-time 5-month program from March to end of July. And basically, the third recurring question that hopefully some of this is useful. Again, feel free to comment or add questions in the chat. The third question has to do with the portfolios, which every year is one of the kind of sort of something that we keep intact. As every time that we experiment, we try to keep the component of the portfolio applications sort of at the core of the application process. So the question is, should my portfolio only include work experience, or can I add projects that are either student projects or even projects that are kind of independent and self-initiated? So Benjamin also kind of addressed this question in his webinar, if I remember, but we invite people to curate their portfolio in the way that best represents the kind of work that they do, that they want to do, that they're interested in doing. So there's no restrictions whether it should be only professional or only student or only realized projects. Please treat the portfolio application as a kind of a stand-in, interlocutor or someone speaking on your behalf with us. So think of it as a kind of a strategic document that showcases the kind of work that you're proud of, that you think is relevant to the research of the terraforming, and don't feel like it has to be kind of somehow redacted based on content. The only redaction is really your decisions about what is most relevant to include. And again, maybe another sort of side question here. As much as possible, it goes without saying, but try to privilege clarity of communication over like trying to wow us with like flash-like websites. It's nice sometimes to have the portfolio be a quite simple document with hyperlinks that work to other work elsewhere. But again, as clearly that you can communicate the ideas that you hold dear to us, I think the better for this. So yes, the format is quite open. and it's obviously depends on your professional background, and those different portfolios have different sort of visual aesthetics and kind of frames, but clarity should hopefully prevail. So hopefully that addresses that question as well. Thank you for pasting things here. I will start going sort of through the chat, and again, please feel free. If you don't think I have answered, try to also ping and add something here. Great. So what if someone has no opportunity to pass the TOEFL exam until November 10th? I would say, obviously, our applications online require a TOEFL exam, especially if you're studied in a country that English isn't the first language. So I think that you can, some of these questions that are more sort of case by case specific to your conditions, it's probably best to kind of explain your exact situation by email to the apply@strelka.com email. And it's a case-by-case process. Still apply, and somewhere in your application say that you will provide the exam later. We won't sort of reject any applications. We won't not look at an application because it's pending this exam. So that should be clear. What sort of visa is required for the program for an EU passport holder? Very good question. Unfortunately, I would not be the person to answer this accurately. I could answer it, but if you want an accurate answer, better to address the apply email. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even going to attempt to answer here. And actually, I just noticed, thank you, Daria, that we have also a kind of a live interventions into the chat where our student coordinator is also answering the questions that I am not able to address. So thank you. Sorry, I just saw that. Can you specify the type of portfolio that you have in mind? Could it be a mix of text, paper abstracts, and visual projects? Can we include ongoing projects that haven't been finished? Yes, as I mentioned, please include your best work. If it's unfinished, include it perhaps mention the parts that are finished and the parts that are pending. If you are a writer, obviously try to include the paper abstracts. Speaking quite sort of honestly from the perspective of someone who spends the better half of November reading portfolios, it is very, very helpful if you are if you do take the abstract quite seriously. Like it's great to send the kind of 35-page PDF of the whole thesis, but try to privilege again these kind of hooks or entry points into the larger work, which could be either, again, the full paper that you have somewhere, or a link to a website that includes the published article, and so on. Please, yes, if the projects are ongoing and relevant, it's actually very interesting for us to take a look at the kind of things that you're working on right now, to assess and to kind of just learn more about how you think about the topics that we're all currently confronted with. How much is the stipend? I think that also is somewhere on the website. Maybe Daria has already answered this, and I haven't seen it yet. But it also kind of changes, I think, year by year depending on the ruble. So I think your best bet is just to take a look at the frequently asked questions on our website, and I think that's definitely one of them. Again, I apologize for not having that answer on the fly here. Which tool sets everyone will learn, programs, techniques? So it's a very good question. The program is quite short. 5 months is a very, and it feels like forever, and it feels also like it took only a few weeks. But essentially, we won't have very in-depth kind of program tutorials necessarily in the program. Of course, we will have a few, and we have had a few in the past, more technical oriented workshops around GIS, around kind of machine learning, around processing, around these kind of around AR, VR, kind of working with Oculus and so on. So we have had software-based kind of workshops. But usually, as we select the cohort, we always have a few people that are more technically minded in the kind of 30 people. And what ends up happening is that they become much better teachers and much better kind of references for the group than any kind of workshop that we could be running. So I would say, yeah, I would say that we try to help if there's something quite specific that we want to look at. Like last year, for example, we wanted to privilege map making, and therefore we ran a GIS workshop. You will be learning some of these kind of softwares as much as you can learn them in a span of 3 days. And of course, everyone sort of learns on the fly through YouTube, which is really the best, often a quite very good technical teacher. So previous researchers and myself as a student in the program, I've sort of taught myself software that I kind of needed for a particular project or a particular idea. But again, there is no real sort of plan other than filmmaking and kind of working with cinema in you know, Adobe Premiere, After Effects, Final Cut, and so on. Usually these workshops are kind of self-run and self-facilitated by the students. And if we think it's critical, depending on the composition of the group, we may sort of run a kind of optional workshop on the weekend or something. But it's kind of a case, we'll see, basically. Have you already started looking at the portfolios? No, we have not started looking at the portfolios. We will wait for the final applications to be over, and then we will obviously try to, again, in fairness, look at all the portfolios at the same time. I can also say that when we are reviewing applications, we are trying to review them in kind of like bundles. So we will have like a few days or a week for the architects. We will have a week for the kind of social science writers, you know, journalists. So we try to kind of compare apples to apples as much as possible. We don't review the portfolios first come, first serve. So if you want to wait for until the final second to submit your application, don't worry. It's neither a disadvantage nor an advantage, basically. It's up to you. Is this year still 30 students per cohort? Yes, that's the plan. We reserve the right to change our minds. We have in the past. Some years it's a little bit less. Some years it's a little bit more. We'll see, but for now, the presumption is that we will still have 30 researchers this year. As usual, half of them will be sort of from Russia and CIS countries, and the other half will be an international batch. And in that composition, we also try to have, traditionally it's been half architects, half non-architects. Over the years, we've sort of reduced the architects to about a third. So usually it's 10 architects, 10 sort of designers, filmmakers, technical kind of minded, you know, programmers and things like this, and then 10 people who are who come from different backgrounds. But we'll see. We don't really have any quotas per se, I would say. Future projects will be based upon the ones from last year, or presumably more self-sufficient and standalone? That's a very good question. As you probably know, part of the big kind of part of the strategy and part of the, I think the benefits of a program like the Terraforming is that it's sort of a cyclical education experiment, where even though we have only 30 people per year, we try to build upon each other's work. And we try to sort of create a network of kind of collaborators and co-conspirators throughout these 3 years, both in terms of researchers and faculty. And for this reason, we tend to treat the work from the, let's say now it's the second year, the work of the first year is not one to be repeated. Like, we're not going to directly work on the projects, nor will we be directly working with the same topics, but we will be highly aware of the ideas that were discussed, of the successes and failures, because not all the projects are perfect. So we will definitely be aware of them. And I think people who are applying should take the time to review some of the projects from the previous year to understand the kind of projects that we would like to do, but also that we would not want to repeat, and the ideas that were discussed. And basically, we would create our own, yes, standalone, yes, self-sufficient, yes, to the extent that the project has its own identity. The project will be sort of a project that emerged this year with the people that are working on it now, but obviously will exist in a larger kind of shared universe of terraformingness that we are sort of working together towards this kind of 3-year arc. And again, this is one of the things that we kind of prototyped in the new normal, and that was, I think, quite successful to build upon a body of work where the success of each project reinforces the success of all the projects, because they kind of coexist together. So that will be the plan again. So, but thank you for the question. What kind of unity between the 30 participants of this program do you expect to emerge? Since I guess one of your stakes here is about forming informal interconnectedness of people with different backgrounds. How do you see the future of the group? Again, also a very good question. So it's always really, really difficult to predict the kind of chemistry that emerges between people that are part of this program. Obviously, myself and Benjamin and the team, the whole team at Strelka, were very privileged to be able to sort of see and interview and kind of connect to so many people. Sometimes some of the people who end up being part of the program knew each other from before, but I think they kind of rediscover each other in the kind of intensity of the program. And I think that the unity that emerges between the 30 people is quite strong because at least in the past, when we're kind of in full immersion in this room in Moscow, especially in the first weeks, the kind of outside world disappears a little bit. Like, this is a very intense, it's a very intense program. It's a very kind of intellectually demanding program in the beginning with a theoretical foundation where the ideas are very new to everyone. So this kind of bond that is created very, very fast is always kind of really nice, very nice to see. We very much want the group to think of themselves as a group, to develop a kind of a social contract and to develop a kind of culture of help as opposed to competition. So as you also probably know, the program has no grades, no exams. We try to limit the toxicity of in my case, traditional architecture school, but maybe some of the other design disciplines or art disciplines that tend to kind of to perform sort of individually. All the projects are quite collaborative. And since everyone works with everyone quite, I mean, all the time, all the projects are, almost all the work that you do at Strelka is collaborative. And it's almost always with a different team that you very rarely choose because we try to basically make sure that everyone works with everyone. And therefore, each module, we change the team kind of in a top-down manner most of the time. So I think, yes, we hope to kind of create a kind of a sense of collective work where authorship is kind of blurred. And because you do so many projects, you kind of forget who did what. And it actually doesn't really matter that much as you are part of the process. In terms of the future of the group, I think it's, I mean, it's also nice to get in touch with some of the alumni from previous years to kind of get their take on this. Obviously, maybe I'm biased, but I think that the group of people, you know, creates a type of relationship that is actually quite unique because this is neither school nor work. It's a kind of very unique kind of reality TV show, survivor-like experience at times. So that kind of creates something in common. And even from a personal note, I should say, I've stayed in touch with most of my kind of fellow students from the year that I was a student, and I maintain mostly very, very good relation with most of the students to the program, and I know that they also maintain that between themselves. The program is also run through Slack, and the Slack channel is alive still. I mean, in some cases, many years after. People still kind of populated with links, invites for stuff to participate and collaborate on. So there's definitely a culture outside that we try to encourage. Sorry, I'm giving very long answers, but hopefully that also covers some of the questions that are about to come. I haven't got my bachelor degree until the date of application. What document should you present? The program is a postgraduate program, so we obviously encourage everyone to have at least a bachelor degree. If you haven't completed it by the time of application, please just make a note in your application that you're expecting your bachelor's, let's say in January or something before the start of the program. But again, don't worry about, still, I think you should take the application seriously and apply. And you could always submit the document at a later date to us by email. Could I say more about the recommendation letter? Should I send it directly to you by employer or send a scanned copy of signed document? I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the application form, there is well, I'm going to see if Daria replied. Daria is replying to everything, but I don't see this particular question. So yeah, so I'll address it. Yes, if you can submit the recommendation letter as a scan in the application, that will be probably the easiest. That's how it's been in the past, and I think it's the same. It's the same this year. For the 2-day workshop question, should that be something you have the existing ability and knowledge to teach, or something if you could scenario? That's a good question. So on the one hand, because the program is quite competitive in terms of the application process, people who end up being in the final 30 are all quite skilled at least one unique thing. So very often, in the case where we did have the time to do more self-initiated kind of optional workshops, it used to be something that someone could do, and in many cases something that someone had already had experience of teaching before. So it's more of the first option. That being said, if you don't think if you think that, for example, the if you could scenario is more is sort of conveys better what you think your skill set is, something that you've never done before but you would like to experiment, and you think that says something about you that's quite unique and relevant to the application process, then go for it. I mean, I don't think we're not going to check. So if you suggest the most interesting workshop possible, this question is more of a kind of hypothetical. We don't. In some cases, we do, or researchers self-organize and do it. But this is more of a kind of a question to learn more about the kind of things that you are good at, or think you're good at, or wish you were good at. So I guess anything goes. Can you talk a bit more about the presentation video? Any topic you think is necessary to mention? Also a good question. Thank you. So the way that I think about the presentation video, which is very subjective, because I would be terrorized of doing. I would also be nervous about doing a presentation video, and I just want to basically reassure everyone that this is just take it. Don't stress about the presentation video too much. Just introduce yourself, like your name, where you're calling from, what are you doing right now. Say a few words about maybe how you learned about the program or why you're interested in applying, but don't sweat it. Don't go into full post-production mode. This is really meant to be a very short introduction, and because I know that it's probably stressful, I would encourage people to not stress too much about it if that's possible. Essentially, this is really kind of an introduction to you. And it's also sometimes to kind of assess, if you're not from an English-speaking country, to assess the level of communication. But it's not something that we will basically accept or reject you based on. So no one will be accepted because of the presentation video, and no one will be rejected because of the presentation video. So that's something to kind of alleviate the stress. Should the portfolio reflect a strong interest in future thinking speculative design? I wouldn't regard my interests as reflective in speculative design, but certainly a key factor. So yeah, I don't think that the portfolio needs to have a strong interest in speculative design. I think it should have a strong sort of focus on sort of a way of thinking. It should not be like a neutral kind of template where basically here's 3 buildings that I drew in my kind of housing practice. I think you should definitely give it an identity and give it some sort of a conceptual flavor. That doesn't necessarily have to be reflective in what we usually consider, or what still some people consider to be speculative design, which is a kind of Dun and Raby type of projects that are like the speculative design aesthetic. the portfolio does not need to reflect that particular style, but hopefully the portfolio reflects, again, the person who made it in the way that how they think about the work that they produce. So projects that are that you think showcase an ability to think, synthesize ideas, and basically make, provocative arguments or proposals that are contextual and interesting, or interesting research sort of examples. This is the kind of stuff we would like to see, much more than the when you Google speculative design, that first page on Google Image. So don't be afraid if it does not look like that first page on Google Image. Can a new media artist working with a speculative theoretical framework apply, especially if the document they spent is a portfolio of artistic practice? Yes, of course, we invite artists and people with that kind of speculative theoretical framework to apply. Always. I mean, every year since the start of the Strelka program, we have had people from that background as part of the cohort. So that's for sure an invitation to apply. Something that I would also like just to point out is that perhaps one of the places where one of the ways in which the terraforming is different from the new normal is that we have purposely made a shift towards a more design research kind of focus, and less of a kind of art residency type of project focused. And not that there's anything wrong with one or the other, but this is very much a design research residency, not an art residency. So if you are applying as an artist, you are definitely very welcome to apply, but it may mean for you and for everyone to rethink how they treat that application. Successful arts residency applications are usually ones where you highly privilege your body of work. The projects have to be consistent, and you're sort of applying with a very, very clear idea of the type of project that fits your practice, and that continues to be part of that kind of biography, creative artistic biography, and almost like Wikipedia entry of yourself as an artist. The program that we're running at Strelka is not an art residency, and the project that you think you want to do at Strelka, maybe you will do that, maybe you won't do that, and you will do something different, better or worse. But it's certainly not the kind of new media artist residency application that you can simply, like, again, take that application you've done for this other museum grant and send it to us. I think it requires a little bit of kind of tweaking to make apparent the fact that the collaborative aspect is one that you are ready to privilege in a serious way as well, because sometimes artists say they want to collaborate with a programmer because they don't know how to program their ideas. That's not the kind of collaboration that we're talking about at Strelka. Hopefully that answers the question, but thank you for that. Should the portfolio include CV and other certificates? No, I think the application covers sort of where you went to school and where you worked. You can if you want, but there's no kind of, if you think it sort of helps explain a particular project that you've done, help us by saying basically the type of certificates and experience that were useful in the production of this project. But don't waste one page of your portfolio just to put a CV because you think that's necessary. I should also say, I think it also says it in the frequently asked questions, but the portfolios are limited to 10 pages. So think carefully about the kind of real estate that you have to make a case. I've been a freelance designer and English German teacher as a job. How could I prove the 2 years work? I mean, short answer is don't worry about it too much. Just yeah, in the application, whatever is being asked there to sort of say where you worked, just let us know where that was. If there's a link and if there's kind of the references, please add them. But I don't know to what extent you need to prove or that aspect is kind of, maybe we'll talk about that in the interview process if it goes to there. Does intensity of the course mean full-time what is our schedule? Traditionally, the program is full-time in the way that it's usually 10 to, let's say, 6, 5 days a week, so Monday to Friday. But there's usually like a brief and a task to do, and the evening is kind of used to do this teamwork. So at Strelka, it's from 10 to 6, but often there's kind of work in the evening, and it's because because it's kind of collaborative teamwork. People don't want to disappoint their teammates and end up staying quite late, whether it's necessary or just for support. So in that sense, full-time really means full-time during the week. We try to have weekends as much as possible. More often than not, we have both days of the weekend available. Sometimes, for example, because our program invites a range of different speakers from around the world, and we have to sort of work around their schedules as well, there may be a case where there's like a weekend online lecture that the speaker could only do then, or a workshop that ends up, we have Wednesday off, and then we have Saturday for presentations or something. So in that sense, it's kind of, it shifts around weekly. We shared the schedule usually a week in advance, so people can know, but you probably won't get the schedule like, here's the 5 months now, because we're kind of adapting on the fly. It's a weekly kind of schedule that people are receiving. Maybe one last thing to say is that the full-timeness of it is also kind of by design, because 5 months is quite a short time, and we really try to, you'll see this, we really try to take full advantage of the fact that we have these 30 brilliant people in the room together with faculty that kind of took time to also be full-time with us. And in that case, it is possible that some of the days end up going quite late, but also hopefully are interesting. Again, I said this in the beginning, but if you are interested in applying to Strelka, assume very much that this is a full-time commitment and that it's completely impossible to have a job on the side, or like freelance contracts on the side. That's something that we will ask you again and again during the interview process as well, to make sure that it's clear. Since you only asked 10 pages for the portfolio, I imagine you demand a glimpse of the projects presented and not a full presentation. Yes, basically, you can communicate a lot about a project in one page. Of course, you don't have to have 10 projects on 10 pages. You can have 3 projects being 3 pages each. You can also have the key idea and how it's connected to the concepts with a hyperlink below to your website that I can click on and sort of look at the projects on my own kind of interest and time. But the portfolio is a little bit also like, there's no entrance exam to Strelka, but the portfolio is kind of a good way of seeing the candidate's ability to think as a kind of as an editor, or the ability to synthesize the key points. That's a skill that's actually incredibly important at Strelka, given the fact that everything we talk about, or let's say not everything, but most of what we talk about is quite interesting. And that kind of curatorial decisions of where to draw the line between core importance, secondary importance, and then interesting but for the next project, that ability is really, really key to all 30 people, whether they're in a design background or not. So in the portfolio, that's kind of the first place where we do see that skill, like someone understanding what the key point of their project is, and kind of understanding that this is kind of a dialogue between them and someone who took the time to look at their project, and therefore in the short amount of time that they have their attention, what is the main thing they want to communicate. Yeah, it is a glimpse of the project. It is a strategic glimpse, a strategic slice of the project that you're kind of presenting. If you need the full presentation, like I said, please feel free to make a website for the application, or link to your own website and just add the link there. And we will, you don't have to do that, by the way, but if you want to do that, that's also fine. I know it's still uncertain, But if the program is online remote, how might you reconcile the international time differences between the cohort? It's a good question. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I can also share that last year, obviously, we had big plans for the first year of the Terraforming. We had a field trip to Cambridge, US, planned, where we were going to relocate the whole program to MIT and Harvard for 1 week. We had an interesting Russian field trip that we were going to go through by train. So like that journey by train was also part of the kind of, it was like a 2-day thing. So we had big plans, but essentially everything had to be adjusted quite quickly. And our researchers had to basically go back in their countries of origin, the international part. And we had students, we had researchers all the way from like Argentina to Australia and everything in between in terms of time zones. So it was quite challenging to find the time that worked for everyone. Last year, what we did is we basically had chopped the day into 3 blocks. We had kind of the morning block from 11 to 1, I think it was. Then we had like the core component, which was from 2 to 5 Moscow time, which was basically morning in Brazil and Argentina and evening in Australia. So basically we had 1 time a day where technically everyone could be able to take part in this. That was at 2 p.m. Moscow time. And then we had the evening block, which was usually reserved for speakers in the US, for example, who are on a different time zone. And that evening block, basically, if someone couldn't make it because it was too late in Australia or in Hong Kong, they watched the recorded lecture the next day, or it happened quite often that people stayed up. So hopefully it doesn't get to that. But one thing's for sure, we're going to find a time in a day which is kind of friendly to everyone. I guess if you're from Hawaii, I don't know what the 2 most extreme cases would be, like Hawaii and something. I'll take a look and maybe get back to if we do another webinar. I'll have a better answer. But we'll figure this out. What major experiences from the last year will be taken into account this year, aside from the pandemic lesson? A very, very good question. Let me reflect a little bit on that. So I think, and again, I'm biased, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But I think that we struck a chord, or we the topics, or the way that we talked about the topics that we were talked about, kind of also by design, because at Struck we try to broadcast as much as possible the projects and the ideas, and like the media component of the program is quite key. Like Struck, a media Institute for Media Architecture and Design, media is first and kind of strongest for a reason. So because of that, we undertook a few experiments during the year out of necessity to open up the doors to like work in progress or ideas in progress. In other words, instead of being completely closed for 5 months and then only showing the final projects, one of the lessons was that because the topics are important to everyone, we think, in terms of like planetary, the design of a viable planetarity is kind of a shared concern. And the way that we talk about these topics at Strelka also resonated with a lot of people. The challenge of making work in progress available outside more often was kind of an interesting challenge to undertake. And with the Revenge of the Real program, special project that we did in April, that was a really interesting major experience that I think we will take into account this year, to maybe by design, even if everything gets better and we are in Moscow full time for 5 months, we will still probably do a kind of a deep dive, like 2-week research project that has to be like publicly presented in some capacity, because it's really nice to get some voices into the mix in the middle of the program. So that's like a major experience that I think was very successful, and that we will take into account in terms of how do we open and close the doors at different times. Maybe another major experience I can say is that in the new normal, we so in the program we are always, like maybe controversially, but we are always kind of, we take a quite a strong role in kind of creating the groups. We create the final groups. There's no like, of course we take into account feedback and everything, but we make final groups of 4 in the normal groups of 4 and 5 people to produce the kind of final projects. The last 5 weeks of the program, 4 or 5 people work on one project. Last year in the Terraforming, again, because of necessity and the challenges of working online, and also because we wanted to cover a lot of ground, we worked in smaller teams for the final groups. So we had final groups of 3 people for the final component of the program, which means that instead of having 6 or 7 projects, we had 9 projects, which was quite I think time consuming and not painful, but something positive, like difficult in a good way to kind of try to productively kind of help out, weekly and so on. We had some pretty late schedules with the tutors here in the faculty, but I think that was also, I think, quite a positive experiment of last year, of smaller groups kind of learning to work and kind of being able to kind of take decisions more quickly, not wait on one another, and also have the ability to kind of help each other out, because it's kind of easy to coordinate in that sense. So that was a kind of a positive experience from last year that will be taken into account this year. Sometimes working in smaller groups is good. So that's one thing. And maybe one last thing that I'm just thinking about now is last year we took, again, because of necessity, the archiving component of the program became quite important, because in order to be able to keep track of the work, whereas usually we would be able to just kind of touch base and kind of go to the studio and kind of see stuff on the wall and print the latest whatever. Last year we couldn't do that, so documentation, like self-documentation, self-organization, archiving and keeping a timeline of your work, that became, on the one hand, quite therapeutic. Like people kind of see their growth, see the body of work that they're producing. But it was also very helpful for other groups, because we did this also in the periods before the final projects. And again, once that's kind of stripped of authorship, and you just have like a shared archive of interesting references, interesting Russian sites, interesting kind of provocations, like that, the ability to call back or to go back to that body of work was incredibly useful for everyone, for me and Benjamin, for the groups who had projects that they forgot and kind of returned to. So the kind of the lesson or the experience of the importance of archiving and the production of the archive as one of the kind of meta projects of the group, both archive of like relevant readings, links, sites. It's very possible that this year we go back to that archive and we find interesting sites where to situate ideas that didn't make it last year, but will make it this year. So that's something that I might think of other stuff, and I'll just interrupt myself and kind of say it. But thank you, that's a very good question. Does the scholarship cover the airfares to and from Russia and also the field trip? So the scholarship or the stipend doesn't cover your flight to Moscow if you're an international applicant. So we basically won't pay for your flight or your visa to come here. Did Daria answer this again? You're too efficient, Daria. But yeah, so as said, the field trips will be covered by the institute. That is correct. Okay, we've made it down the list, either because I've done such a great job or because there's no other questions. Does anyone want to add something here while, or maybe a component of a previous project or a previous question that didn't have time to kind of properly address? Thank you. Thank you everyone for taking one for the team and having the courage to post. So is there a possibility to join the Terraforming program on a second year cycle or third in principle? Do you mean that you would apply now, but you would go into get into the third year, or can you just please again clarify that question? And I'll come back to that, but just help me understand, because maybe I don't get it. I'll go to the other one and hopefully, yeah, please help me understand. Alexandra, what are the most common benefits that previous students stated? Yeah, I mean, talking on their behalf always feels quite strange. I also kind of noticed that maybe a few of them are in this chat. So again, if they feel like they want to voice agreement or disagreement, they can say. I think one of the common benefits is obviously the benefits of access to people who are to faculty. First off, to faculty who are all quite sort of top in their fields. Like we have Blaze this year from Google AI, who's an incredibly busy person, but who kind of and not just like Reza and like all of our faculty basically are quite sort of spread out in their commitments. But one of the benefits is definitely having this kind of, I would say, close to peer-to-peer relationship with the faculty, in a sense that the faculty comes here knowing full well that we have kind of put together a group of 30 very bright people, and we encourage the faculty to think of themselves as researchers, and therefore they come in with kind of ideas that they haven't fully formed and engage in like very honest, unfiltered, sometimes politically incorrect in terms of like the ideas that are being discussed are very honest. So the benefit is basically to have the opportunity of speaking and of building a network with the faculty in ways that probably you wouldn't, even if you went to their, for example, host institution. If someone is teaching at Harvard or MIT, they're teaching one class a week, possibly you will spend more time with that faculty in the 3 days, 4 days at Strelka than some of his students or her students spent doing a semester with them. So that's a big benefit. Another benefit is obviously the network of researchers themselves. So Ben also kind of spoke to that point, that we encourage projects to take a life of their own after the program, but more importantly, we encourage the group and the groups to continue to collaborate after the program. And that could be on the project, but that could also be on another project, on a new project. And it's actually really nice to see. This is basically my fourth year running this program. Like a lot of really great, strong collaborations are persisting of people who met through the program. So yeah, you'll get to know these 29 people quite well. And it's not to say that you'll be friends with everyone equally, but the collaborators that you will meet and also the resources, like even if you're not the best of friends, knowing someone who knows someone who knows someone, like that benefit of like for your future projects will be, I think, really priceless and very different from a lot of the other programs where I teach and where I've been involved in. The people who go through the Strelka experience really leave with a community. It sounds cheesy, but yeah, I'm kind of feeling romantic. But it's true. It is true that there is a strong community that persists year in and year out. Right. Thank you for a more pragmatic question before I tear up. How important is the 2 years of work experience? I mean, it is important to kind of showcase that you've sort of operated in a context that is kind of fast-paced and stressful, to the degree that the program is fast-paced and stressful. Like often at work, you are very often you're in a situation where you have 8 hours to do something that's imperfect, but it still has to come out. Like this kind of non-perfect sweating of projects, sweating of ideas, that the project isn't like a sculpture that like an artist you are working for 18 years before it's unveiled. The ability to kind of work on the fly is like super important. It's very, very important. And we encourage people to think of design in those ways, sort of imperfect and sort of fast, and having the work experience kind of more often than not, you kind of learn to be less perfectionist, and also you learn to dissociate the work from yourself. That's really, really important in a program like Strelka, where not every project is or should be an expression of your deep down individual artistic values. Like working with groups, sometimes the concept prevails, and learning to contribute without being the main author always is important. So in that sense, that's important. In another sense, if you don't have the 2 years of work experience, don't let that stop you from applying. Like I said before, the official requirements of this program is it's a postgraduate program. You have a bachelor's. You're between 25 and 35. We've had people who were 21. We had people who were 39. It's not going to be the determining factor. Obviously, it does help, and if you have it, make sure you highlight it. But if you don't have it, don't feel like this is something that should stop you from applying. Thank you. Can you explain the interview process a bit? Yes, sure. So based on previous years and based on my experience working at this stage, we usually have around 300, 400 applications by the end of the deadline. And again, a few of them have like a few missing documents that they kind of send in, their bachelor's and then the recommendation letter or something. But basically, we take the first few weeks to carefully look at everything at least twice, like look at all the applications by at least 2 people, but often way more. But at a minimum, myself, Benjamin, sometimes the alumni, sometimes other people from the faculty that we kind of invite to look at a particular batch, like take a look at the journalist or take a look at the. So every portfolio gets looked at, an application gets read, and then we invite, depending on the year, we invite between sort of 60 and 100 people for the interview stage. So about a third of the applications, or a fourth of the applications, move on to the interview cycle, where we sort of reach out and we say, we invite you for an interview. We schedule a time that's convenient, time zone wise and everything. And then we speak to everyone for about like, we send questions in advance that we sort of to help you prepare, like here's the kind of stuff we would like you to think about. It's not like a list. We don't ask all these questions. Sometimes we ask all 5, sometimes we ask none of them. But we sort of invite 100 people, send them some information to prepare, so we can have a more kind of productive conversation, and they can also sort of think a little bit about their answers beforehand. When the interview starts, they're usually kind of nervous. We ask them not to read their prepared answers, not to worry about that, kind of push it on the side, because there's nothing worse than someone sort of reading at you. And then we try to have like a very candid conversation where it's less kind of like you, like it's less us interviewing you than it is kind of a two-way kind of conversation. What do you think, like, why do you think this is something that you would want to do? And how do you think you could contribute, and how would the other 29 people sort of benefit from your sort of from your involvement in the program? But it's a kind of a two-way conversation, where we also encourage people to ask us questions about the program, to address some of their kind of maybe more specific kind of questions about their own role that we would see for them, and so on. And then from those hundreds or people, then we kind of select a smaller selection of like 40 to 50 people, and then we would have possibly a second interview, or we would sort of start thinking internally, how do we compose the group? So the group is really the way that the program is the way the cohort is organized is not like here's a grid of points, and everyone who has like this grade gets in, and everyone who's below that line is on a waiting list. There's kind of no, there are some criteria, but there's no like percentage or something like this. We are basically trying to create a group, trying to kind of, Benjamin says like casting a play, I think before we used the metaphor of like making a meal, like people are kind of all working towards the composition of the cohort, which is the project. So everyone that we kind of invite, first of all, everyone that we invite to the interview stage is probably strong enough and interesting enough, and like at the interview stage, essentially every one of these, if we could have a program of 100 people, we would kind of take those 100 people from the interview stage. So it's not like anyone fails at the interview. It's more like we're trying to assess carefully, A, the skills the person could bring to the think tank. B, the benefit of other people, the other 29 people, of working with that person. Basically, how that person is able to translate his skills across someone else, his ability to communicate, to collaborate, his desire to communicate, to collaborate, and sort of see their personal growth and gain. What would they gain from this experience? Some people who apply actually may be overqualified, and therefore maybe people who, if we got a grid, they would score highly, but depending on all sorts of other criteria, they may not make the final 30 for other reasons. So again, it's not it's quite yeah, I mean, the interview process is something that we take very seriously, and the composition of the cohort is very much a design project. That's myself, Benjamin, and kind of the Strelka team tries to kind of take seriously. Next, so Evgeny, is there a possibility to participate in later cycles without being previously involved in the first? Yes, yeah, of course, yes. To be perfectly clear, for us, the program is cyclical. So for the team here, for the faculty, it is a 3-year arc. For the researchers involved, they are involved in one of these 3 years full time. For example, I can imagine the researchers from the last year connected to us in some way. Of course, they're still on the common chat, on the Slack chat. Those of them who are kind of in Moscow or like they stop by, they attend lectures and so on. They don't receive the stipend anymore, so they are no longer the kind of the students, the researchers of that particular year. But each year has its own group of 30 people. But at the end of the program, we had 90 people who have collaborated on these ideas at various stages. So yes, if you don't apply this year, you can apply for the third year. Having applied before, and I should say, if you applied before and even if you got the interview or didn't get the interview and you want to apply again, you are very encouraged to do so. It's again, neither an advantage or a disadvantage having applied previously. If you applied and didn't get in last year, we very much encourage you to apply again. But if you haven't and you want to apply for the first time in the third year, that's also fine. It's not something that we are necessarily kind of privileged. Would a TOEFL certificate from September be valid? Hopefully Daria to the rescue. And maybe she already answered. Hi, Nicolay. Could you please reflect on a new year theme in relation to the last year? Which parts of the Terraforming and repeat come through? Do students end up choosing topics for projects themselves, or do tutors also shift students in different ones? Okay, so yes, the way that we create the themes for the next year, like it's not like, for example, we don't have a big roadmap of like, here's what we're going to do in year one, here's what we're going to do in year two. Like essentially, the ideas that kind of come out in the first year, many of them technically fit within the topics of the first year that we had, but some of them also fall through the cracks or become overly addressed, and therefore signifies to us that actually this is an interesting theme that we should pick up on and kind of make even more or formalize. And that's how basically anti-performing became a topic this year that we're taking a bit more, that we're privileging more. Anti-performing used to be a 3-day workshop last year in collaboration with Helen Hester, kind of a very quick exercise. but the richness of the conversations and the kind of the material that was put on the table and the discussions that we had were really interesting, and then ended up recurring, coming back over and over again in the program. And this year, essentially, we are building on top of that to just highlight so that people can kind of do a little bit of research ahead of time on it, and also kind of come prepared, knowing that this is something that was kind of a discovery of the first year. Benjamin also kind of explained that in his first webinar that if the first year was about how to change the planet in order to change us, this focus on anthropoforming is almost like the other side of that coin, like how to work at the scale of the anthropos and to work at the kind of at population scale on the anthropos is one way of kind of designing or proposing an alternative, more viable planetarity. So anthropoforming has less to do with like body art or kind of looking at the kind of individual subject as a site, but maybe more to look at the species itself as a medium of transformation that does have planetary repercussions. So it's in this way that I think we are talking through the anthropoforming as a kind of the other half of terraforming, or terraforming through other means. Do students end up choosing their topics for the projects themselves? Yes. I mean, when we form the groups, the final groups for the final projects, which is usually the last 6-7 weeks of the program, we kind of already know that maybe these people collaborated in the previous projects that still has legs, and maybe they have some leftover ideas that they want to kind of formalize in the final project. Maybe we think that due to their technical expertise, all three of them are, two of them are filmmakers and one of them is a researcher, that could be like a very strong film project. So we obviously have some sort of idea about the type of work that we could imagine this group doing, but we don't necessarily impose, or we haven't done that in the past necessarily, over like heavy-handedly imposed to various degrees. We rarely heavy-handedly impose like you three people are doing this project. So students, of course, have their own set of interests that through a kind of process of research and weekly meetings, we go back and forth with me, with Benjamin, with the tutors. And let's say that it's kind of a half thing where we suggest references or help to find a site, or try to steer them away from some of what we think is kind of stuff that is either not feasible in the amount of time that they have, or maybe different from what they imagined their first idea to be. So for sure, the projects will emerge from the group, but they are also kind of reliant on a lot of nurturing and mentorship and sessions with the faculty, but also with other groups. So for example, groups kind of bounce back ideas off each other, and that also kind of often changes the nature of the final projects. I don't think it's ever happened that the thing that the group wanted to do the first week ended up being the thing that they actually did. That's sometimes it's close, but we basically try to encourage a kind of an exploration phase where we also take on like I said, an editorial or a curatorial role in thinking of the think tank as the project, in making sure that we have a few of the projects that we think should emerge from that particular year and that particular cohort. Hopefully that answers. When will you announce the results of the selection process? I think we're aiming towards mid-December. I think by the end of this year for sure. So I think that's the plan. Please correct me, Daria, if that's not the case, but I think that is very much the case. Okay. We're back at clearing the list, and we haven't lost any participants. So either you guys are waiting on me, or there's more questions that are kind of in the works. Travel restrictions to Russia. Yes, from personal experience, yes, they are. We'll see how that resolves itself by March. Like I said in the first comment, yeah, it's very hard to predict what the situation will be in March. And our hope is still very much that we could do the program that we usually do. That being said, if there are restrictions and we can't hold a program in Russia full time as we usually do, we will have a version of the program that will be with parts offline and maybe with other parts online. Do you anticipate any changes in the number of applications because of the pandemic? It's hard to say. I think the numbers are pretty similar to the usual kind of applications at this point. Yeah, maybe there's two types of people. Maybe some people have more free time now for various reasons, and they think that they can actually commit full time to 5 months, which is great. Maybe some people really wanted that MIT field trip, and they want to make sure that we can offer it and will apply in the third year. So it's hard to say. I don't think that there'll be any significant. Maybe there's different profiles who apply. Something that I didn't mention before also, but I think it's important, is that if you're not a designer and if you're not an architect and you're kind of, we really strongly encourage you to kind of take a look at this critically and find ways, if you are kind of already curious, maybe find ways to kind of, in your application, make it your own and kind of tell us what the role of someone from your particular background would be, especially at this time during the pandemic. I've done quite a few sort of offline and even a few online events around kind of the topics that we're talking about. And what I've noticed is that because of the pandemic, actually, a lot of people are drawing parallels to the kind of the issues of climate change through a different lens than the kind of the usual one, or the 3 R's, like recycle, reduce. Like sustainability is kind of shifting in kind of focus due to the pandemic, or applying some lessons from the pandemic onto that topic. And for that reason, a lot of people who would have never applied to this program before are now kind of seeing at it as something relevant. And for that reason, maybe there are more people who apply, at least I hope. Does Strelka offer support in finding short-term accommodations in Moscow? I would say yes. I think that there's yeah, well, we don't provide the accommodation, as Dara says, but there are definitely kind of resources in terms of information of how to find it. So that's maybe the clarifications. The support isn't on like we'll find it for you, but there is a kind of a helpful, reasonable attempt at kind of helping out international applicants and finding. How do you classify the applicants besides local and foreigners? How does the selection process occur? It's a good question. Especially in 2020, it's like if you're an artist or if you're a designer, it's very difficult to classify sometimes what exactly you do. Like, are you a service designer, an interface designer, like a software designer? We try not to classify people by like the profession that they sort of that they kind of put at the forefront. Like sometimes people, of course, like if you're an architect, it's a bit easier. But if you're kind of a new media artist or a curator or a researcher that has obviously like experience in filmmaking, experience in web design, it's quite difficult to kind of see how to compare you to, and we try not to do it by label of profession. We classify the applicants by basically like the similarities of their kind of work and experience. So yeah, foreign architects, we will look at the same time. Maybe everyone from like a editorial or journalism background will look at the same time, just to make sure we compare them. But the selection process kind of occurs after we've done a survey and a kind of overview of all the applications at a first glance. And then for the second, more careful kind of where, we would spend half an hour and sometimes an hour per application to kind of read everything and kind of make sure we get the greatest hits. usually the first scan is to kind of cluster and see basically the kind of applications that we're working with, and then the second one it goes often by skill sets in terms of like what the possible contribution would be in the think tank. If we know that we're interested in kind of filmmaking, then we want 5 or 6, or let's say 5 filmmakers in the cohort. Then it's actually quite helpful to see the people who have that skill set, even if some of them put themselves as architects, for example, because obviously they're architects, but a lot of their work is film based. So we would kind of look at them at the same time that we look at their work. Yeah. But other than that, there's no kind of official, like I said, quotas or if you're lucky enough to have multiple skills at once. Again, you're an architect, but you also kind of edit a journal, and you also kind of have 2 short films that you've done. Like, please make that all very, very clear, just because then we can sort of look at your applications in at the time where it's most advantageous for you, basically. Do you believe the Strelka student projects have any impact on ideas developing worldwide? Yeah, I mean, there's short and long answer to this. On the one hand, I again, maybe it sounds cheesy and I'm definitely biased, but I think that the type of student projects that we do are the ones that we should be learning like professionally how to do. In other words, the type of multidisciplinary collaborative projects where collaboration is actually lifts the project beyond the lowest common denominator, but people learn to, through conflict and through resolution, to do multidisciplinary work that combines law, that combines spectrum design, that combines filmmaking. Those are the kind of projects that actually we should be doing more of in the world outside of, let's say, student work. And therefore, training people to think in those terms is something that, because we take seriously, people who come out of the program have these skills which are incredibly important in the real world, wherever they land. So even from the framework of the human capital story, training people to work on the ideas that are worth developing, as opposed to yet another, gallery piece or post-it workshop. Like, sometimes it's nice to kind of try to transcend the kind of things that we are used to seeing, and develop projects that are trying to find their own typology. Essentially, they're trying to create a field as much as they're trying to create a project. So that's something that I think has an impact. And again, I've seen this in other schools where I teach, that there is an appreciation, and education is kind of changing around developing those kind of skill sets, which has, I think, a real impact. I mean, I'm not going to call any names, but many of our alumni end up, I think, having really interesting positions. Either they make their own practice, or they end up taking jobs that I'm really happy that someone who went through our program is now doing. So in that sense, that is the type of kind of success story, not just training designers, but training future clients who understand the kind of design work that they can now start to enact and commission. As far as the projects themselves, like, Strelka is not, we often say, like, it's not an academic institution necessarily. It's not an art residency, but it's also not an incubator. So there's no pressure to make like an MVP version of like an app that we expect it to be funded a few months later on. There's no, we have had some projects that were developed as concepts, and because of the kind of resilience and motivation and stubbornness of the students, they managed to kind of help survive and help fund and hammer and manage to find people to support the idea beyond the school project. And that's great when it happens, but it's not necessarily the first priority of the program, I would say. We want the projects to basically, especially since it's a short program, define a problem space where more people should be focused their energy and thinking. So the projects are really kind of the identification of a problem or the identification of an opportunity without necessarily being the solution that is kind of being proposed here. I think that's almost equally important to focus the kind of to calibrate the conversation. And as already mentioned, we think of the program, even though the program is 5 months, our education cycle at Strelka is actually 9 months. It's basically like we have the 5 months of the program, which is like researchers are at Strelka doing the work, the program finishes, the stipend ends, but then we have the whole summer, the next 4 months, to actually broadcast the projects and basically help them find venues for their communication, help them connect them with people or support them in any way, where either through a reference or through a recommendation or through an invitation sometimes to take part of a publication project that we're doing or a conference that we want to invite them to speak at. Because the real project really is not, the projects aren't like the final project that is being presented at Strelka. They're the first public presentation of an idea that we want to encourage having a life of its own afterwards. And in that sense, I've even had cases where teaching in like North America, someone references one of our Strelka projects from 3 years ago. First of all, not knowing that it's a Strelka project, but also not even knowing that it's a speculative design project, like assuming that this actually happened and using it as a reference. Like that's kind of cruel. Like the fact that the projects exist as an idea and therefore people have it as a kind of building block for their own work later on. I mean, that is that is an outcome, and that is impact, quote unquote. Hopefully that answers. Yeah, no worries. Is there anything that I missed in the chat as I was kind of scrolling? Thanks. Okay, it seems I've answered everything. Don't feel like you have to stay here just so I can feel better. If you guys think we've covered it, please let me know in the chat. If you have any other questions, like now's the time. Like I said, this is our second webinar. We won't be doing a third one, so kind of it's basically the last chance to ask anything about the process. I actually didn't prepare any kind of like closing remarks. The only thing I wanted to say is basically we really appreciate at Strelka and Benjamin and the whole program really is really overwhelmed by the fact that people are really taking an interest in this body of work. So if you feel like it's something that you would like to be connected to, even if you feel like you don't have the work experience or you haven't graduated yet, or maybe you're too senior, like you're at a point in your life where basically you're done with school, still it's really great to be able to connect with you in your application. And when in doubt, I would say, I don't really remember what the fee is, but I think it's pretty symbolic. So I'm not saying this just because we want to take your money for the fee. I genuinely encourage people to apply and give it a shot. It's really, yeah, we've had multiple cases of people who have gotten in the program who like never thought that this was for them. In some cases they were right, but in other cases also they were pleasantly surprised, and we were pleasantly surprised. Yeah, beyond Strelka, we ended up being great friends afterwards. So yeah, that has to count for something. There's another question here. Any horizons of what's going to happen after the terraforming? Yeah, dude, I don't even know what's going to happen next week. So it's hard to say for now. And one nice thing about Strelka is that because it's an independent program, because it's not accredited, because we're not dependent on Russian Ministry of Education kind of guidelines, we I can say this, we get to do pretty much anything we want in terms of like, if we think something is worth testing out, we do it. And that's actually a really big advantage of working at Strelka and of studying at Strelka. This is truly like a pretty experimental space that still has quite a, as you can see through Benjamin's work, strong academic focus, strong theoretical foundation, people who have like this body of work behind them that have weight to their ideas. But also, like I said before, the education program is itself a design project. Like myself and Olga and the whole team, like we really treat this as a design project. And whatever happens after the terraforming will probably be quite different, but it is hopefully going to be continuing to build on top of the previous experience, like we did with the new normal, for example, which was really, and like we did with hybrid urbanism, which kind of melted away into the new normal. The new normal was a response to, and now the terraforming is a response to this. So if the question is framed as in, you're not sure if you have time to apply now for the terraforming, but you're curious about what's going to happen next, it's hard for me to say. I don't even know who is going to be involved and if the world still exists. But yeah, but for sure, because part of the education model and mission of Strelka is to prototype future multidisciplinary design practices that we need in order to bring about the jobs that we need and the type of work that we need outside of school, then I'm sure that it's going to be equally different than what's happening now by design. So it's not going to be the terraforming take two. Great. I think we've covered it. I'm not sure if this is going to be online afterwards. Probably, fortunately or unfortunately. But once again, I want to thank everyone really for taking the time today to kind of sit through with me here in Bulgaria, and also sincere apologies for the tech reality. Again, maybe to come back to that other question earlier, one of the experiences of this year was actually that you need to basically be ready for anything. So I think we're getting better and better at adapting quickly to these tech glitches. And I again thank you for your patience at the beginning, and hopefully this was useful. If you have any other questions, please send an email to apply@strelka.com. Yeah, if there was anything that we missed, please drop us a line. The deadline for applications is on the 10th. Hopefully I got that right. I think it's the 10th. And really looking forward to reading your applications and yeah, hopefully getting to talk to you at the interviews, and hopefully getting to hang out in Moscow or elsewhere. Great. Thank you. So I'm going to sign off, and yeah, let's stay in touch through the newsletter and our other channels. Take care, everyone.